Alright, when it comes to the red flag warning in Northern California, we are 2 days down with 1 day to go. I'll remind you that the last 2 days in Northern California, the wildfire conditions have been about as bad as they could be. And looking at the satellite imagery here, you can see no new major fires have started. I can't emphasize enough how happy I am to say that. And like I said, we have 1 day to go. The conditions throughout the day today do continue to pose some concern, but I'm happy to say over the weekend, things are going to be looking much better. So we've got a lot to talk about today, so let's just dive straight into the forecast. Now, as always, we're going to be talking about the three main variables we always talk about: temperature, winds, and humidity. These are the three variables that affect wildfire the most. And we'll start with temperature here. As you can see, the highs today could be nearing some record levels as we get close to the triple digits throughout the valley, and then down in Santa Rosa you can see 93 degrees. Now, I'll also point out that Saturday, it's expected to stay hot. We're still going to be in the mid-90s, and then even on Sunday, we're still warm. It gets into the low to mid-90s in most places. Santa Rosa, luckily back into the 70s there. So temperature-wise, things are still looking warm. So that is always a concern with wildfire. If you're in the near record highs, that's always something to be worried about. The other thing is humidity, and you can see that it's 9 a.m. in the morning. We're already at 20%. That's extremely low for 9 in the morning. And you can see throughout the day today, that dry air is going to be sitting over all of Northern California. Whenever I see single-digit humidities, it kind of rings an alarm bell that there are some dangerous wildfire conditions, because if the air is dry, the vegetation gets dry, and then it's much easier for new fires to start, and then when they do start, it's much easier for them to spread. So when you mix 97 degrees with single-digit humidity, it definitely poses some concern, and you can see those low humidities and dry air is going to be sitting over the majority of Northern California throughout the day Friday. And then as we get into Saturday, you can see that that dry air is still going to be around. So really when it comes to temperature and humidity, they are remaining bad throughout the day today and throughout this weekend. Here's why I'm saying that this weekend is not as much to worry about as the last 3 days. It really has to do with wind gusts. And people might disagree with me, but in my opinion, wind gusts are the most important thing when it comes to fire danger, because if you get 60 mile per hour wind gusts and a little fire starts, it can rapidly spread that fire into a major blaze in no time, as we've seen numerous times throughout this season. And I'm happy to say that the wind gusts will be calming down this weekend. But before we get into the good news, I will point out that as of right now, we do still have some extreme wind gusts. In the North Complex area, they're up to 40 miles per hour. And then down here in Napa and Sonoma area, still seeing some extreme gusts into the 30 mile per hour range. And whenever you see gusts in 30 to 40 miles per hour, that means in some of the drainages and canyons, you might be getting some 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts. So as you can see, those extreme wind gusts will be sticking around through this evening. They've actually extended the red flag warning, because as you can see, we are still going to have some rather gusty winds into the 30 mile per hour range. But here is where the good news comes in. As we push into Saturday, you can see those extreme gusts completely calm down. We get to maybe 20 miles per hour, and this is the peak, the gusts that we're looking at here, not just sustained. So 20 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour, that's some good news. That's going to be moving in early Saturday morning, lasting throughout the day Saturday, and then working into Sunday as well. You don't see any of those purple colors back over Northern California. So although it's going to be dry and warm, in my opinion, wind gusts are the most important factor, and that variable is looking good over this weekend. Now, I will remind you, it is still looking bad throughout the day today, so I'm going to be watching the models, the satellite, the hotspot map all day long today to make sure nothing new pops up. If something does, I'll make another video keeping you guys updated with the most current information. But if we can just get through today, like I said, it's looking a lot better. And if we could dodge the bullet of the last 3 days, that would just be huge. Mother Nature would finally be giving us the break we need, because it seems like every time throughout the season when one of these red flags comes in, it's created some massive wildfire. So I would be extremely happy if we could just get through this one without anything new starting. So you can see the area that is covered in this red flag warning. It's almost all of Northern California. And previously, this red flag was supposed to be lifted at 11 a.m. today. But unfortunately, with some of those extreme wind gusts sticking around until 4 and 5 p.m. today, they've actually extended the red flag warning until 6 p.m. in most places. So while that's certainly not what you'd want to hear, that the extreme wind gusts are sticking around a little longer than usual, I still just can't get over the fact that the last 2 days have happened and nothing new has started. So if you don't know what a red flag warning means, it basically just means dangerous wildfire conditions. It's going to be dry, it's going to be warm, and you're going to have wind gusts possibly around 60 miles per hour. So you can see we're not in the clear yet. The conditions throughout the day today do still remain kind of alarming. Certainly something I'm going to be watching, but like I said, if we could just get through it, this weekend's looking much better. So, as I've said, we have had some extreme conditions the last few days, much warmer, much drier, especially when compared with last weekend, and that has allowed the creek fire to actually become extremely active. And you can see all the smoke that the creek fire is producing right now, and that's having an impact on air quality. So you can see this map says that it's moderate air quality over all of California right now. I have a tendency to say that this model underestimates the amount of smoke being produced. So I'm thinking this Fresno and Valley area are actually in that unhealthy range right now. And I mean, that just basically looks like what it should be saying based on the satellite imagery. As you can see, there is a large amount of smoke over those areas. Now, if we look at the forecast for today, it looks like they're going to start to take that into account, kind of getting into that unhealthy for sensitive group range. But then getting into tomorrow, they have majority of moderate to good air quality for California. And I would be hesitant to say this is actually going to happen. And here's the reason why. The creek fire is mostly producing a lot of that smoke because of a number of factors. We got steep terrain, we've got a lot of fuels in that area that are critically dry, and then it's warm and dry in that area. And those aren't really going anywhere over the next 2 days, so I expect the creek fire to keep producing a lot of smoke. Now, once it does produce that smoke, it's supposed to be the upper level winds that push the smoke out of the area. This purple color would show strong upper level winds. That would just push smoke out of the area, but these blues and greens allow it to just sit there, as you can see on the satellite imagery. And unfortunately, the upper level winds are going to remain extremely weak in the Fresno and Valley area throughout all day today, working into tomorrow, and then even working into Sunday as well. You can see the upper level winds remain weak, so that will allow the smoke just to sit there as we're seeing right now. Now, something else I will point out though, the August complex has flared up a little bit. It is producing some smoke, but in this area, we have these stronger upper level winds. So that's why the air quality is better up here, and you can actually see it perfectly on this smoke forecast map made by the Sacramento National Weather Service office. This graphic is just amazing because it perfectly shows what I was just talking about. So looking at the day right now, this is showing the morning, you can see the smoke from the creek fire just being able to sit over the valley because of those weak upper level winds, allowing that smoke to settle down to the surface, produce some bad air quality. Now, I want to back this up because now I want you to watch the August complex area. Now, you're going to see it's going to have it produce some smoke up here, but this is where the upper level winds are stronger, so that smoke just gets pushed out and it goes into the ocean, and then we get back into that good air quality. Perfect visualization of how upper level winds affect our air quality. So I'm predicting we're going to have some unhealthy air in this whole area throughout this weekend. And Northern California, I think, will remain in the good air quality range because, well, we have stronger upper level winds and we don't have as much smoke being produced as we do see with the creek fire. So just getting back to this, you can see where that red flag warning is. And I think it would be interesting to go into those two fires that do remain active first and the ones we were just looking at producing all that smoke in the region. Now, one of them is the Castle Fire here, and I would say that this one's not looking too bad. It looks basically the same as it has for the last 4 days. You got burning in this northern area here and this north point here, and this is another one where there's steep terrain, a lot of critically dry fuel. So I'm expecting the areas burning with this one to continue over the next couple days as we do still remain warm and dry throughout the weekend. Now, the one that's producing the most smoke right now is the creek fire. And I'm actually happy to say that this looks better than it did yesterday. Yesterday was all that growth inside there. This thing was rapidly expanding, and you can see it's actually appeared to slow down. And this is something we've been talking about all week long. So it's interesting to see some of the factors we've talked about finally taking effect. Now, I'll remind you of some of those things we've been talking about. It's the fact that we're going to be pushing into rockier terrain where there's more rocks, there's less vegetation, which means less fuel for the fire. You can see it represented by that gray color there versus this green forest color. And we've been talking about once this fire pushes into that rockier terrain, it should slow down. And then if it pushes even farther north, it's going to push into the Lion's Fire and slow down even more because that all the fuels in this area, or at least a good majority of them, have been burned out in 2018. And you can see how that affects the fire. As the creek fire pushes into the Lion's Fire, it just stops in its tracks. So that's what we were talking about all week long, that once this fire pushes into the rockier terrain and the Lion's Fire, it should slow down. And I believe that's what we're seeing on this hotspot map right now. Now, it does still look active in this area, don't get me wrong, but it certainly looks calmer than it did yesterday. Now, I'll also point out this northwestern section appears to be actively burning, but again, that's going to be starting to push into that rockier terrain, so I expect the fire behavior to remain moderate in that area. In this eastern finger, this is an area I am still a little bit worried about. This chunk of terrain right here that you see is extremely green. That could continue to burn as we're not in those rocky terrain areas and we don't have a burn scar in that area. We can actually see that on the Wharf S-Fire model because that's where this fire is predicting growth to occur over the next 2 days. Now, one thing I'll point out that this model shows so well is how stronger winds lead to more rapid fire growth. It was what we were talking about earlier in the video, and this model just perfectly shows how that works. So you can see these extremely strong winds, and just guessing based on the wind direction and how strong these look as compared to some of these smaller vectors here, you would guess that you'd get some strong growth on the southern side of this fire as the winds push the fire in that direction. So let's see if that's what this model predicts. Exactly. So that's just a perfect visualization of how winds and fire interact. Where you get stronger winds, you get faster fire growth. And like I said, there are still some pretty dry fuels in this area. So if we're going to see any rapid growth with the creek fire over the next few days, it'll likely be in this area. Although I'm not expecting it to be that bad. We do still have a good amount of resources on this fire, but you can see that that is the area that this model is predicting could still see some growth. Now, one other map I wanted to show you guys. This is a new map that I found. This basically shows the timing of the burning for the creek fire. If we go down here, you probably can't read this. It's extremely small writing, but it shows that this fire started on September 5th. And then now and those are represented with the green colors, the areas that burned a month ago. And then with these red colors are what has burned recently. So you can see the entire southern edge of this fire was active a month ago. And we haven't seen a lot of burning in this area throughout the last week or two. Where we do have all that recent burning is exactly in that active area we've been covering all week long. So it's that northwestern section where we see slow growth, this northeastern section where we have seen some rapid growth over the last few days, and then also this eastern finger. So I thought this map was pretty cool just to be able to see how this fire has progressed. And it's also interesting to point out how long this fire has been burning. It's been over a month now, and we've talked about this before, but the main reason this has been able to just continue when our other fires burned down is because bark beetles killed 80 to 90% of the pine trees in this area. So with all that fuel, it just allows the fire to continue even when you get favorable weather conditions that put out the August complex and the North complex over this last weekend. So let's get into the numbers. We talked about the Castle Fire earlier. Not expecting any extreme growth with that one. Should be sticking around 167,000 acres, maybe getting up to 170 by the end of this weekend. Now when it comes to the Creek Fire, we're at 344,000 acres, and I'm expecting the growth with this one to actually slow down a little bit. We've seen some active growth over the last 3 days. As you can see in this map, recently we've had some pretty extreme fire behavior, and I'm expecting that growth to kind of level out as we get into that rockier terrain and the burn scar. So if I had to guess, I'd say we maybe get up to 347 by the end of this weekend. Nothing too major, especially when compared with some of the earlier progression of fire as this fire was first starting out when we were getting 40,000 acres burned a day. Like I said, we do still have some good resources on this. About 1,000 personnel, 20 crews, 13 helicopters, 42 engines, 11 dozers, and 36 water tenders. Now, the weather forecast, like I said, it is going to remain warm and dry in this area. Certainly not triple digits, but mid-80s is still warm, and we are trending a bit drier than we have in the past. And you can see that it remains dry 24 hours a day. We don't get those great nighttime recoveries that allow the fire to calm down. The relative humidity graph is basically just horizontal throughout the next 48 hours. I would say overall forecast-wise, I'm not too worried about this fire. Just as you can see, it's not covered in that red flag warning, but we do have a number of factors all working together, so we will still continue to see some active fire growth in this area. Although again, I'm not expecting anything too extreme. So the next fire I want to talk about is the August complex here. As you can see, it has flared up a little bit. This is something that we talked a lot about at the beginning of the week. I'll remind you, at the beginning of the week, this fire looked like it was completely out. Over this last weekend, temperatures were in the 60s and 70s. We even got a little bit of rain, and this fire was looking out. And then with those warmer conditions, the drier air, and extreme wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour, we were afraid this one was going to flare back up again, and it turns out it did. As we click in here, you can actually see some of those areas that have flared back up again. I'd have to say this is looking a little worse than it was yesterday. You can see this northern section, this northwestern, northeastern, some of the interior parts all appear to be actively burning right now, which is something we did not see at the beginning of this last week. Now, this probably won't be great to hear, but I'm expecting some of these flared up regions to actually increase throughout the day today as these tricky, warm, dry conditions, pretty windy as well, continue throughout the day today. Although I expect over the weekend, we will hopefully see them calm back down again as those winds calm down. So looking at the August complex numbers, largest wildfire in the history of California, well over 1 million acres burned, which is more than we typically get in an entire wildfire season. Some good news though, we do have 78% containment, so that's at least some good trend to see there. That containment is still continuing to rise, even though some of the areas have flared up. And we do still have over 1,000 personnel, 20 crews, 3 helicopters, 81 engines, 23 dozers, and 20 water tenders. So like I said, conditions throughout the day today do remain tricky. You can see wind gusts getting up to 30, maybe 35, 40 miles per hour in some of the drainages and canyons. And we're going to be extremely warm, mid to high 90s throughout the August complex area. And then we're also going to have some dry air into the low teens, possibly single digits. So I'm expecting those flared up areas to continue to increase over the next maybe 12 hours. But then there is some good news as we get into the weekend. It's going to be getting a bit cooler on Sunday, which is good to see. But the main thing I'm excited about are those extreme wind gusts will be calming down this evening and especially into tonight. As you see, we get back into those blues and greens that we love to see versus these extreme purples. And that is going to stick around throughout the weekend. We're going to be remaining calm, especially Saturday night. We're going to be getting down to maybe 12 mile per hour wind gusts, which means sustained wind is going to be maybe 4 or 5 miles per hour. Oh, 2 miles per hour, even better. So today, flared up regions most likely will continue to burn, although I'm thinking things will be getting better throughout the weekend. Now, there is one other thing I want to point out because this is something I was really hoping I was not going to have to report on, and unfortunately I do. North Complex appears to have flared back up again, but I will point out it's not looking too major. It's not like the August Complex where we have large areas of hotspots. It just looks like there are some isolated areas that appear to have flared back up. Now, what I mean by that is yesterday and the day before, the North Complex looked completely out, but even though the satellite isn't able to pick up hotspots, there are still smoldering areas where maybe a log is still burning on the inside. And then when you get extreme wind gusts in there, like we have seen in this area throughout the last few days, that can actually flare back up those burning areas and create some of those hotspots that we're seeing now. I will point out though, it doesn't look too major. I don't think it's anything to really worry about at this point. I will keep my eye on it though. One other thing I will point out is apparently yesterday a fire started around the Orville Paradise area and there were some new evacuations, although I heard from a number of sources that they contained that fire, which is great to hear that it didn't turn into any major fire, which is actually surprising to hear because the conditions in this area were about as bad as they could possibly be. We're in the 90s, extremely dry air, wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. So amazing work by our firefighters to handle that blaze before it turned into anything big. As you can see, wind gusts are still extreme in the North Complex area right now. 42 miles per hour is not what you want to see, especially when you have some areas that appear to be flaring back up again. But it should be getting better. Whoops, I accidentally switched what we were looking at. It should be getting better throughout the day today, and especially working into Saturday and Sunday. I think the major threat for the August Complex and the North Complex will be behind us. And, I don't really even think there's a major threat going on right now. It's just interesting to point out that they do appear to have flared back up, although, honestly, I don't think anything too much to worry about. Hopefully, I haven't made today seem too bad. We do still have some bad conditions, but if we could handle the last 2 days, I think we're going to be fine throughout the day today. And it's going to be awesome if we do just get through today without anything new major starting, because, like I said, this weekend's looking good. So I always like to end with some good news, because when you do have conditions like we're seeing today, it's easy to get some fear and be afraid, but there's a lot of good news. One, it's been about as bad as it could be the last 2 days. Nothing new has started. Can't emphasize enough how happy I am to say that. There's also some great news. The Zogg fire here remains completely out. This one has not flared back up again. It's considered finalized, 100% containment, staying at 56,000 acres. Now, the other good news, the glass fire, I was a little bit worried about this one because Napa and Sonoma had some pretty bad conditions over the last 2 days. And although we do see one little spot that looks like a hot spot has popped back up, that's not all that much when you consider the conditions we've had in this area over the last 48 hours. So I would say with the glass fire, things are looking good. The extreme wind gusts in that area throughout the day today aren't going to be as bad as the last 2 days as well. So not too worried about the glass fire. Should be staying around 67,000 acres. Hopefully we get to 100% containment and finalized within the next few days. That would be just great to see. The last one is the Bobcat fire in Southern California. That one's looking good. No new hotspots there. Remains at 115,000 acres. Most likely getting up to 100% containment sometime soon. So looking at the 2020 wildfire season in general, has been a bad one. Over 4 million acres burned. But something I will point out, over the last 2 months, it seems like every time we get a red flag warning, the SCU and LNU pop up, or the glass fire and the Zogg fire pop up, or the August complex re-flares back up. And I have to say, over the last 2 days, it's been about as bad as it could be, and we're looking pretty good. So I'm hoping that's going to be the case by the end of the day today. If anything does pop up, I'll record another video to keep you guys updated with the most important, updated, current information. But if I had to guess, I think we're going to be good. I think I'm going to be giving my update Monday morning, and I'm going to have nothing but good news for you guys. Hopefully that is the case. As always, thank you to CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service for all the amazing work you do. Thank you to San Jose State and Dr. Craig Clements for teaching me everything I know about wildfire. And if you or any of your friends or family have been affected by these wildfires, my thoughts and prayers go out to you, and thanks for watching.